Hello everybody, this is Carmen and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I will be continuing with final particles. I would just like to note before I begin, the content I put out in my videos are based on my own personal usage as a near-native Cantonese speaker, as well as extensive research using both Chinese language and English language sources. I also frequently consult other Cantonese speakers and teachers to obtain a more balanced view of the language. My purpose is to use English to teach Cantonese in as clear a way as possible, drawing parallels between the two to capture the essence of various Cantonese expressions for English speaker learners. Variations can occur, of course, as different regions use Cantonese slightly differently. As a learner, you are free to adopt whatever method works for you and your goals best. As part of my Final Particles series, I will leave a link of all the websites I use as extra research to complement my videos, so you can check it out and develop your own understanding. Of course, if you want to learn and speak Cantonese with a high level of proficiency, I highly suggest you expose yourself to the language as much as possible. Watching Cantonese content is always the easiest and one of the most effective. If you can, find some friends or language exchange partners to practice with. Notice how the language is used in action and link it back to what you have learned. Anyways, without further ado, let us begin. Just to recap, what are final particles? Final particles, aka ending particles, are words placed at the end of a sentence to convey subtle emotional tones or provide additional meaning. They are crucial for expressing attitudes, emotions, and making the sentence more dynamic. And they are commonly used in informal speech. Final particles help add depth to Cantonese conversation. For more information, refer back to my previous videos. Ma is one of the most common ending particles in Cantonese. While this particle is more common in Mandarin and formal written Chinese, it is still heard in brush-spoken Cantonese, although less frequently than in Mandarin. In Cantonese, it functions similarly to its Mandarin use, to turn a regular statement into a neutral yes or no question. Like this. Nei ho, nei ho. You are good, or hello. Every Cantonese learner should be familiar with this phrase by now. It's a greeting equivalent to saying hello in English, but directly translating it into English, you would get you are good. Now we add ma, nei ho ma, and this becomes are you good? A question answerable with yes or no. Of course, in English you can't use yes or no to answer the question of how are you, but in Cantonese you can. Here is another one. Nei食飯. Nei食飯. As a statement, this means you eat. Now add ma. Nei食飯嘛? This becomes another question, do you eat? Also answerable with yes or no. This can also be used to ask about someone's intention, like, are you eating? As in, do you plan to eat shortly after? Do not confuse this with the present continuous. This usage is not asking whether someone is eating right now, at this moment. Here's another example. Nei返屋企? Nei返屋企? This means you go home. Adding ma, nei返屋企嘛, to the end turns this into do you come home or do you go home? But based on context, it is more commonly used to ask about one's intention of going home. So, are you coming home or going home? To ask whether someone is planning to go home shortly afterwards, like the previous example. Once again, it is answerable with yes or no. Notice that ma is simply placed at the end. Nothing else in the sentence changes. Generally speaking, me means what, which is what most learners are most familiar with. However, me can also be used as an ending particle, which is tied with the meaning of what. As a final particle, it often conveys that the speaker finds something unexpected or is doubtful about the information they have just heard or observed. Something surprising or unbelievable. It changes the tone of the sentence to suggest astonishment or incredulity, making the inquiry sound less neutral and gives it more emotion compared to using the standard question particles like ma, therefore helping to add a layer of personal reaction or context to the question. Let's look at some examples. Hi. hai is very versatile in Cantonese, and you often can slightly tweak its meaning based on context. By itself, this is an affirmative along the lines of yes or right in English. Adding me, hai me, changes the overall tone to oh really, or more like what? Is that so? To convey shock. The meaning of hai therefore ties to the meaning of be to indicate a state of being rather than yes like before. Here is another example using two particles. Hai, ni, ge. Hai ni ge. Ge used at the end of a sentence can either emphasize a statement or indicate a possession. In this case, it shows possession. Refer to a previous video of mine for more on this usage, linked in the upper right corner. As a normal statement, this is a statement asserting the fact that it's yours. Placing me at the end, hai ni ge me, and it must go at the end, turns it into a question like, what? It's yours? Suggesting that the speaker is surprised that the item belongs to this person. Here is another example. Ni食咗飯. Ni食咗飯. You've eaten rice or a meal. A familiar phrase to many learners, by itself it means you have eaten. As usual, adding me, ni食咗飯咩? At the end adds a hint of shock, like, what? You've eaten? Suggesting that it's shocking to the speaker for this person to have already eaten. Ne is very commonly used to apply a previously asked question to the preceding word, equivalent to how about, what about in English. It can also be used in a rhetorical question, usually one we ask ourselves, where an answer isn't expected. One common sentence is this:你, you. Adding ne, ne, at the end turns this into a question, applying the previously asked question, not mentioned here, to the preceding word, which is ne in this case. Meaning, what about you? For example, 你好嗎? How are you? 我好好, I'm very good. 你呢? 你呢? What about you? 我好好, 你呢? I'm very good. What about you? As you can see, this applies the previous question, how are you, to the preceding word, 你. This is how we reciprocate a question in Cantonese and in Mandarin as well. Another example. 你食咗飯未? Have you eaten yet? 我食咗飯啦. I've already eaten. 你呢? What about you? 我食咗飯啦. 你呢? I've already eaten. What about you? I added la at the end here to indicate a change of state, to reflect that this person has already eaten, a change from the previous state of not having eaten yet. It also sounds more natural and milder. You can also ask about other people. For example, 我食咗飯啦. Daniel呢? What about Daniel? 我食咗飯啦. Daniel呢? I've already eaten. What about Daniel? If context allows, you can also ask about objects or animals. This one, is a bit difficult, and there isn't an official way to write it as it differs between different Cantonese-speaking regions. We often use it to ask for confirmation about something, especially something deemed unusual or surprising, and can sometimes convey a sense of disapproval. Here is an example. Hai, haya. Really? Is that so? Here, is used to confirm something the speaker has just learned or heard, with a tone of slight curiosity, possibly disapproval depending on context. It can also convey a slight sense of surprise. But don't confuse this with the earlier, hai me. This expresses surprise or shock and conveys a tone of disbelief. In this example, 你唔食飯. 你唔食飯. On its own, this means you're not eating. Adding 你唔食飯啊. makes the question softer and more conversational, as if the speaker is gently confirming or checking in rather than asking directly. You're not eating, huh? As in, you're not going to eat? In this example, 你而家返屋企? 你而家返屋企 means you're going home now. Adding 你而家返屋企呀 seeks confirmation, implying the speaker is checking if the other person is indeed going home, possibly with a hint of surprise and maybe disapproval. As in, you're going home, huh? But I don't want you to. Something along these lines. The last particle we are looking at in this video is ga in the fourth tone. Again, there isn't an official way to write this character, although the latter is more commonly used on various websites. You might have guessed already, this is a combination of ge, which I previously introduced, and which I just introduced. To recap, ge is generally used to emphasize the certainty of a statement. Refer to my previous video regarding this. Therefore, ga is used to seek confirmation or clarification of something with more emphasis and a hint of uncertainty or surprise. This is used when the speaker isn't certain of something, so is asking for verification. It can also be used in a rhetorical question. Here is an example. 係㗎 係㗎 This is very similar to the previous example we saw using as both are used to seek confirmation about something that the speaker has just heard or observed. However, adding a ge element and using ga instead, it adds emphasis and highlights the speaker's uncertainty. Really? Is that so? Here is another example. 你係今日返屋企? 你係今日返屋企? You're going home today. 你係今日返屋企㗎? Ga here turns the statement into a confirmation-seeking question. The speaker is asking if it's indeed the case that the other person is going home today, potentially with a hint of surprise or to double-check. The usage of 係 here functions to add extra emphasis. Theoretically, you can omit this. This is an example of how you can use ga in a rhetorical question. 我想 by itself is a very general and simple statement, meaning I want to. By adding ga, 我想㗎, the overall tone changes to a bit more of a rhetorical question with a hint of irony. You think I want to? Indicating the speaker had just done or is about to do something unwise, but they had or have no other choice, although they acknowledge the bad idea. Those are the final particles that I will be sharing with you in today's video. As I mentioned before, the very best way for you to grasp nuances like final particles in Cantonese is to expose yourself to the Cantonese language. Because Cantonese is such a colloquial language, you might benefit most from just listening. When listening, balance what you listen to. Films and dramas are a great form of entertainment and invaluable when it comes to learning a language. If you want to grasp the different types of spoken Cantonese, I suggest you watch vlogs of Cantonese speakers from different regions or find teachers from different regions like Hong Kong, Macau, Guangdong, Malaysia, and so on. Once you've reached a certain level of proficiency, enough to hold a conversation, you can find some friends to talk to. Anyhow, thank you very much for watching as usual. If you found this video helpful, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below, and I will see you next time. Bye!